6 senses come into play here. The 5 that we were taught in school: see, hear, smell, touch, taste. And the most important one, I think, for survival in the 90s, the sense of humor.
I am of an obsessive nature. Anything 1912, anything Titanic. If it said Titanic, if it's got a picture of the Titanic, I want it. I was absolutely normal till I saw the movie when I was 10 years old. Once I saw the movie, it took my life over.
People are born collectors or they are not, in the same way that they have blue eyes or brown eyes.
It's triggered by something that just appears to you and says, you know, I'm unique, I'm new, you shouldn't leave without me. And for example, the inedible foods, they're plastic noses, and you open the nose and candy comes out of the nostrils. Green rock candy comes out of the nostrils for children. Then you say, okay, I've got to have those two. And you start looking for other inedible foods and odd candies and stuff. And the collection grows and grows and grows.
Originally, what was most interesting to me was what I could rescue without paying anything for it. Because that's, first of all, because I had no money, but also just with the fact that it was being discarded, and you had one last chance to be rescued.
I couldn't understand as a child how a ship could strike an iceberg, a steel ship, and sink. So that got me inquisitive. One thing led to another. I collected 37 years. I never played sports in high school. I didn't want anything to do with anything. I wanted to study the Titanic. 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. Literally.
There was one thing I say about my collecting. I quit drinking, quit smoking when I was 19. And this is my cigarette and booze money.
For a long time, all I had was things I needed. And then came the time when I could get things I just wanted. And that's where Betty Boop came in.
I feel being an average American, I can go out and just pick up anything, and I get that immediate feeling of joy from acquiring an object.
I like Donald Duck, because I think Donald Duck is, well, certainly far more than Mickey Mouse. If you know the Disney history, and they made Mickey Mouse because he became the emblem. He had to become a good guy. So his nasty habits all passed to Donald Duck, who got to be us, you know, frustrated, you know, temper and not thinking. And I like this little guy, one, because I think this is a wonderfully silly image of Donald. And two, it's a Dell giveaway. Dell Comics, who used to publish basically all the cartoon comics, used to have giveaways. And when I was a kid, I thought, oh, geez, I'd love to get these, but not available in Canada. So when I found this, I just thought, wow, this is like a childhood dream come true.
For me, the chase, making the deal, is really like 50% of it. And in fact, when I get the toys, a lot of times it's almost anticlimactic. It's like, oh, I've got it now. That's nice.
Stamps, coins, and I was collecting little cars, and my sons at that age were very interested in toy cars. They just wanted to play with them too much, and these, of course, they didn't show any interest in, so on a fluke, I had 1 or 2, and then before I know it, I had 10. A few years down the road, I had 100, and then 200, and I got up to about 500, and now I'm down to 400, because I got rid of a lot of the doubles. My sons take their lunch to school in a paper bag. They're too cool to have lunch boxes now. Kids don't want to have lunch boxes anymore. You know, in the old days, it was like a status symbol. When I was a kid growing up in the 50s, they were nice to have at first when you were a kid, but I thought nothing, of course, back then about bashing my fellow students over the head with them and that type of thing at all.
When the newspaper or magazine come in the house, I started saving all the Santa Clauses out of it. And I'd cut out all the Santa Clauses and put them in a scrapbook. So there's something genetic.
Many people think, oh, I'll bet you can't wait until you have finished your collection. Kiss of death. You never want to finish the collection. You always want to at least suspect that there's something else out there because the hunt is so much of it. Writing to other people, getting auction catalogs, putting ads in magazines and stuff. You pretend as though you want to finish the collection, but as you're starting to get the stuff and say, my goodness, I've only got 5 more things to go, you really deep down, and sometimes not so deep down, hope that those are going to be 5 top things to get.
I haven't a clue on how I started, but one piece led to another.
At the local fairs, I was just barely into school, maybe 7 or 8, and everybody brought their boxed lunches with them, and when they were finished with their paper plates, I'd go around picking up the cleaner paper plates, and I'd wind up in the evening coming home with a stack 4 feet high of just ordinary paper plates. Put them in the attic till finally the parents were sick and tired of them there, and one day at school I found out they'd chucked them. So I started with something else, I don't remember what.
I kind of like quantity more than quality, I guess, you know. I like a lot of stuff. I don't like to spend a lot of money. I hate those collector people at some of those antique shows are just, I mean, things are outrageous. They make it impossible. I guess I don't like to be called a collector. I don't want to be categorized as those people. Then I go to those shows that are kind of snooty and they have everything so expensive.
These people are insecure, they're very introverted, so they acquire all these things, and it becomes more important to them than life itself. Any change in their life, and they're really sick people, but they're also harmless people.
Well, yeah, we called eccentric, and there's lots of names attached to collectors.
Boop collector. Booper. Boopabilia is another name. Boopomania. So I guess I'm all of those.
I've heard people, when they talk about, well, if your house was burning, what would you save? They run for their photo albums. Well, for me, every one of these things has a story behind them. So my photo album is in all of these little toys.
It's colorful, it's playful, it's whimsical. It brings back a lot of memories. A lot of the toys I can remember as a kid, although I didn't necessarily have them, but I remember seeing them. One could take a very deductionist approach and say, well, all of these objects are frivolous. They have no practical significance. You can't cook with these, or you can't, survive on these. They're just toys that most people have outgrown. But I look at them as more than just toys. I look at them as reminders of things that I associate with as a child.
Hunters and Gatherers will return on TLC. People around you, TLC.
Basically, I'm a child that never grew up. I put too many things into what a child likes because I can't say I'm reliving childhood because I never grew out of it. I have a son and a daughter. They don't want this. That's not their dream, it's Dad's dream.
Basically, it helps me get in touch with my inner child. Okay, I can go out and I can go to work and take all the stress of the workaday world, and then I can come down into this room, and for 15 minutes or half an hour a day, I can become 8 years old again.
I picked up a folder at a garage sale last week that has some of this. A diagram of the solar system. It's from 1958, and I'd forgotten all about it, and there it was. It was a dime at a garage sale. It's just a folder. It's not worth much in the collector market, as they say, but this thing is a key building block for me personally. I had my papers in this at school in 1958. I remembered it, finally saw it again. I wondered, I had that image in the back, and it instantly came to fruition. These kind of things cocoon you, soothe you, give you a joy and a comfort.
I collect things in order to bring order out of chaos. I don't usually collect by bidding at auction or buying through antique magazines. I go to flea markets. And for me, seizing the item, finding it and bringing it home and putting it with the others like itself so that it'll be together in a family grouping is very important.
I love the comfort of having these things around me. I guess I'm recreating my life at the same time that I'm living it. Let's face it, there was a safety factor and a certain number of things that the atomic age and the 60s, even the 70s had that will never again exist, and these objects can remind us of those moments.
Well, I collect sugar packets And I got started probably in the late 50s, simply because they were there. And I began to notice them, and I saw the variety and the color and the educational value of them. And it started out being just an accumulation, and then I really seriously began to collect. If you ask me what I've really formally counted, I have to say about 12,000. But it has been so many years since I've had a chance to continue counting and sort that I would say it's probably closer to 20,000. But that's not tops, because we have a club member who has over 37,000 different packets. So I'm a novice. When I'm tired of thinking, and because of my other interests, I have to think seriously about a lot of things and very responsibly involved with other people, there comes times when all I want to do is have a big box of sugar packets in front of me and go through them and see how many different I can find, and then I find duplicates that I can pass on, and that's exciting. You know, I can mail an envelope to somebody, and so really there's a lot of reasons why I enjoy it. You do with it what you want. You can touch upon it very casually, or you can get deeply involved in it, but it's just another aspect of life. You know, why are you interested in anything? Why is anybody interested in anything?
I used to paint, sculpt with the traditional materials, but I found that collecting these items and using them as the props, as one would use colors on a palette. I'm an artist working with American culture. That's my medium. I had an exhibit this year called This Is Your Life, and this is really what it's all about. This is your life. I'm trying to mirror and reflect back to us what we here in America have lived with. All the things we've grown up with that have affected our lives, have got us to where we are today. You know, they're building blocks, the actual things, I think, which have affected us the most.
Well, I collect a number of different things that I think are linked by their relevance to pop culture, or their irrelevance to pop culture.
They're desirable because they do remind us of a great time. And let's face it, it's a little bit more tenuous now to be living in the modern American city, or in some areas there's a little bit more. It's due to a number of things, particularly the American handgun. The reason is to make social commentary, you know, much like you're doing with this film. You're trying to document it. I'm trying to document American life. It's a big task. Just give me my 2 cents worth in, and that's all I'd want to be remembered as, the guy who gave it a shot, trying to make sense of it all.
It definitely shows the American fascination with celebrity and fame as something distinct from talent, you know, where you can become famous for any number of reasons. And once you become famous, you can put out an album, you can write a book, or you can have someone write a book and put your name on it. And Americans like that, and will buy it because you're attached to it, because you're famous.
Packaging is so much in our society, and it's been that way for a really long time. So they will, you know, try and lure you in with just about anything. One of my favorite things is a record cover that has a woman with really large breasts on the cover, and it says, biggest hits. Oh, what?
A couple of generations ago, women didn't have the same options as men in anything, and if there was time away from chores to do anything fun, a man was more apt to do it.
I'm really interested in changing images of women. They haven't changed very much, unfortunately. I mean, a lot of the bad girl stuff, a lot of the, you know, pulp magazines and stuff like that, they're absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it's hilarious. If men would have you believe that this is what they think of women, then we would have to think that men are very, very stupid. I'm sorry, you're in the same species. Just because it's female, it can't be that much more stupid than you are.
Now, I knew a man in San Francisco, Oakland area back in the 60s. He collected Victor Electric records from 1925 and 6. And if you were in a Goodwill store or a flea market, and you were going through records, and he saw a Victor Electric, he'd reach over and grab it right away from you. He did that to me a couple of times, and some people almost hit him and got into a fight. I said, well, I will take it if you want it that bad. A friend of mine got into his house once, and he had all of these Victor records. You had to walk around like going through an intricate maze tunnel, and all he had was these stacks of records stacked up, all Victor Electrics. He never played them, he never listened to them, he just collected them. And he was really a sick guy, and he was hostile and aggressive too. Fortunately, people like that, they die, and the records go back to the dealers or the collectors, and we get them all back eventually, the collectors who enjoy them.
A lot of collectors are hard to get along with because everyone has their different peccadillos, and some people very obsessive about condition and other people aren't.
If I wanted to become, let's say, a great mathematician or a knowledgeable physicist or something, I don't have the talent to do that. It's beyond the pale. I would be wasting my time. But if anybody wanted to say, I want to get to know a certain kind of glass or a certain kind of toy or something like that, that's not beyond the pale. They can actually buy the things to study, and they can become a person who otherwise seems very ignorant in many other areas. It's wonderful because you really feel like you're a master of some area. And I think that's real important for a lot of people, to get a mastery over some subject.
Well, what's inside? I think that a lot of people, maybe it's an insecurity. You know, I've been into the collecting of Coca-Cola memorabilia for 15 years. I've attended conventions and everything else, and when you meet those people, I mean, it's a very extreme thing. I mean, right from their shoelaces to their underwear to the hat to everything is Coca-Cola. I mean, the women walk around with Coca-Cola earrings, and it's an obsession. And you find that with a lot of collectors, that they're obsessive people, including myself. Compulsive obsessive is, I think, the word.
They should really look at us, because who does more advertising for them, you know, than people like me? As soon as I'm out of my job, I'm into a Coke shirt all the time. I got it about 3 years ago. I wanted to get a tattoo, and I didn't want something that wasn't meaningful. And Coke's meaningful in my life, and I got the Coke tattoo because of that.
Hunters and gatherers will...
When they come in, you may think you know what an obsession is, but when you leave, then you'll know. People have no idea how obsessed, an obsessive personality, what they can do.
Either you're going to collect the whole set, or you just have one of each and no duplicates. That's an emotional, completely irrational emotional thing.
Keeping with the fitness trend of the 90s, this, you know, get your body in shape, I feel you have to exercise your brain as much. And we all have memories. Our memory cells are intact, hopefully. Sure, they might be coagulated with some fatty tissue buildup around them, but a visit to the collection here, the Unknown Museum, might stir up those cells. Viewing an object sometimes will just instantly, you'll have an instant association with it that only you might have. I call it mind aerobics, you know, keeping the brain active and, you know, breaking up that fatty tissue, as I mentioned. And I think this is good for each visitor to exercise the memory cells. And it can stir up a whole can of worms, of course, if someone has had a bad personal experience with an object. And many people come here and they're bawling, the tears are rolling, they could swim out of the place, you know. But they come here and, you know, and they have great experiences too. There are those who probably shouldn't come. There's going to be a whole lot of stuff stirred up that might completely freak them, you know. It's okay, that's good though. We need to be freaked out occasionally. What are you going to wear blinders? It's no worse than TV, this place. In fact, it is TV. It's a visual newscast, is what it is, or channel surfing. It's one object here, it's Mickey Mouse next to it's Scotty, and there's a Colonel, and there's Roy Rogers, and there's Morticia Adams right next to each other. You might see Roy Rogers, but you don't have time to focus in on Roy and have that, because your eye is racing over to Morticia's. This is how it is in the brain. All these thoughts are they're right next to each other in the brain. I mean, the memory cell for Roy is right next to the memory cell for the Beatnik and Deputy Dog and Wilma Flintstone. You know, so if you see them all together, again, the chaotic effect that can be achieved by this juxtaposition, I try to think could be beneficial to a new insight to what we're all about.
I don't collect things because of their monetary value. In fact, I find that a hindrance. Very often, I'm onto some new little area of something that I've just discovered. Gosh, I remember I went through this phase, and it was so short-lived, of arts and crafts style embroidery, flat satina cotton embroidery. I was just like, wow, on brown linen. And I was like, just grabbing every piece I could find. And they were cheap. They were all over. And all of a sudden, some article comes out on them, and they're no place to be found. All of a sudden, they're $50 for a little piece instead of, like, you know, $5 for a big, long table runner. And it's like this abortive collection to me. It just tore me up. I've never been able to afford to get all of those that I want.
This is the Johnson Smith catalog. It's over 600 pages. It was published in 1941. It has novelties, gum that makes your teeth black, all the things that kids love, tricks, magic, jokes. In 1943 or 4, I sent in 3 cents, and I got the Johnson Smith catalog, but the war was on, and it was a little 200-page thing, and I was really disappointed in it. Now, to make a long story short, that catalog in mint condition was right here in Santa Rosa 6 months ago. A guy at the Railroad Square, the antique compartment, they sell all that kind of stuff. He wanted $45 for it, and I didn't have $45. So I came back to the house and got 2 boxfuls of everything I had. Peanuts and Snoopy and old games and just old stuff. Kitchen utensils, anything I had. And I had a Lone Ranger globe from about 1941 or 2 like that. He couldn't live without that. So I traded him even for that. So I own, it took me since 1941, I've been waiting to get that catalog.
Feeling of cleverness when you find something very, very cheap at a yard sale. But I'm not one of those people who boasts about screwing little old ladies out of their inheritances, you know what I mean? And I've known a lot of people who do that.
I mean, I don't really have a lot of use for people that are just into the hobby to make money.
I mean, you talked about value. How do you legitimize an emotion? You try and rationalize it, and, you know, when you want to apply logic, fine. That's when you talk about value and, you know, what its retail value might have been today and what you can sell it for. But I'm in it for the enjoyment, you know, as I said, the thrill of the hunt. Like one of the stories that I constantly tell is, you know, about going, and as I've been doing every week for, you know, 30 years, and going buying comic books every Friday. And I was, you know, buying some comic books, and there was a 11 or 12-year-old there, and so he says to me, "Are those worth anything?" And I said, "Well, they're worth something to me. I just like to read them." And he looked at me and said, "Oh, you're a reader," as if somehow that's a terrible thing to be if you buy comic books. But that's what, you know, I'm in it for a story, and if the art and the story work together, then maybe that's a piece of art. Low art, by some people's definition, but art enough for me.
A person did this. This is not done by a real person who maybe had aspired to be one of the 20th century's great artists or something like that. They sat down and they designed this, and they put themselves into it.
I like art that is made for mass reproduction. I tend to see things like the artist who did a label, a fruit crate label. I see them as an artist who's really working in a medium which has a limitation. The limitation is he or she has to show a picture of the species of fruit and then some beautiful surrounding, and has to usually do their own lettering too. So that's very nice. Whereas with gallery art, there aren't so many limitations. There's so many kinds of gallery art, from abstract impressionism. It's all just garbage to me.
First of all, you know, at what level? Because at some level, none of this is important.
Hunters and gatherers will return on TLC.
Practical advice from the world's finest woodworkers.
Call this toll-free.
Perhaps these modern-day collectors like myself are doing the hieroglyphics of the modern day, you know, telling the story with the symbols of our society, which what better symbol than the actual artifact itself?
I started one day, as many collectors do, very unawares, just stumbling into an antique show, which was a nostalgia show, and finding in front of me a box of advertising trade cards. The feeling was shock, mostly, when I realized that these things actually existed, that we could reach back into the past, as it were, and grab some of this, and remember and realize what people were thinking, what their values were, what kinds of things they interested them, what the consumer was buying at that time. We can still pick these things up, hold them in our hands, as people did 100 years ago. That was the very first thing that I think really affected me very deeply.
You call it the lost world, perhaps. You know, you're trying to find the things that you lost. And it's sort of a treasure hunt for yourself. Everyone has their own personal reason for having things, but I have many because they bring me I feel very, very comforted by being surrounded, almost buried in these things. You know, laying back and say, oh yeah, I have to, you know, if I want to go play with something, I say, oh, 1958, oh yeah, I want to go play with that game, or open that lunch pill and stick my head in it and smell the aroma of that old peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
You know, it is a cultural thing where the same plastic that makes a Ren and Stimpy candy dispenser could also be making a heart catheter. It's the same raw material. It's just, what are we going to do today? Are we going to make heart catheters? Are we going to make Ren and Stimpy candy dispensers? Those sets of decisions are made by society as a whole. You know, some people are going to make the heart catheters all the time, but some people are going to like, okay, Friday, Ren and Stimpy candy dispenser day.
The doll is just a carrier. Barbie is never a role model, contrary to what people say. Barbie becomes a model of whoever buys her. You hear a lot about the very famous or the very poor or the movie stars, but the average household goes through life doing their own little thing, and this kind of shows some of these little things. And this product has mimicked the average society in every shape or form of a fad or a fashion, the lengths of dresses, the kinds of shoes we wore, if we wore hats and how silly they were. First time we had Corningware, first time we had boom boxes. So there isn't anything that they have missed.
If you go into a museum that shows Queen Anne's chair, that's fine, but you never sat in that chair. You never lived in the house with that chair. But if you come into a museum which has a common electric iron hanging from a ceiling, you probably, chances are 50% use that iron sometime in your life. So you have a direct hands-on experience with that object. And also there's no guard standing there telling you you can't touch it.
These are not the documents of the great people of a given age. These are not the documents of the generals and the admirals and the presidents. These are the people who made up the country. And these are the long-forgotten voices of the past. On April the 15th, 1865, Charles H. Gilmore notes in his journal, "Sorrowful, dreadful intelligence. News came in this a.m. that President Lincoln was shot in Ford's Theater, Washington, and died at 7:22 this a.m. Went to Gavin's with Merritt McGivern. Bought one pair of thick shoes, $1.25, tobacco 25 cents, sundries 50 cents equals $2. Gavin paid me $10 in place of the roll of pennies. Week's expenses, $3.47.